So it all depends on the community, because we're obviously not all the same. All Indigenous communities are different. But to reiterate my point, so on average, Indigenous workers like earn more than twice as much in oil and gas jobs than they do in other industries. And then, that's from Statistics Canada, like that's across the board. And so I do also have another quote. It's from Chief Counselor Crystal Smith, and she was talking about how her First Nation is like the closest to the LNG Canada project, and how their community was like completely transformed because of the partnerships that they had. So I do believe that, oil and gas, it does help Indigenous communities in some cases. So it may be a struggle to pivot as quickly as other companies when, you've been working for so long, it's been generational. It's taken you, this long to finally become like a successful oil and gas company, but now you have to pivot towards renewable energy. So they may not have as many, I guess, easy advantages or even really like the knowledge on how to do it. So it's an ongoing thing. But to basically say, it's tough. So it's really just seeing how it will be affected and how it will affect the communities and how we're going to be able to pivot that.
What I will say is I think that the term just transition can be easily misinterpreted because you can easily hear it in a way that's like, why don't you just transition? Just do it. It's an easy task. And that interpretation is like so far removed from the whole point of the concept. So because of this, like I believe using like a different term, maybe like transition justice or inclusive transition could create less polarization for sure. And like could make people feel seen and feel like they're taken into account when we speak about like making a plan for effective energy transition, which is something that we all want and we all can benefit from.
In places like Alberta, where we are very heavily reliant on hydrocarbon industries, carbon capture and sequestration is quite a viable solution, just with our geography and geology and the way that we have everything landscaped. We have lots of these facilities at our disposal for storage purposes. It doesn't leave any of the workforce behind and ensures that we still have the ability to utilize these as energy sources without necessarily impacting the environment with a high carbon output. So pretty exciting there, and definitely something that we can look at.
Similar to the last question, it affects everybody differently, all the different communities. But basically the energy sector just brings prosperity to whoever uses it. Indigenous workers make up approximately 7.4% of the oil and gas sector, which is a pretty large number. And then so that represents, tens of thousands of jobs. And then also referring back to like the solar project on my reserve, it created like a plethora of jobs on my reserve. Like they were hiring for months at a time. So basically just in full, it brings prosperity.
Yeah, well, I feel like a just transition kind of like gets along with like the restructuring of the economy, which is like definitely something huge and has a lot of impacts. For example, the displacement of workers and like the need to find like different work, and it's not as easy as like just taking one job and like bringing it to like it's not just as easy as taking like one job in oil and gas, for example, and bringing it to like renewables. It takes a lot of formation and like education towards it. So I feel like those are some of the challenges that we will have to face.
I'm going to start by saying I think we can all agree on the fact that we love our environment and that we do need to take measures to protect it, which comes along with a low carbon future and reducing emissions. As we have discussed and reiterated a few times, it's important to create a strong, evolving workforce with equal opportunities, so not leaving anyone behind. And there needs to be a solid plan in place before transitioning to ensure that kind of all of the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. No sense in rushing into something and having somebody bear an equitable load.
I would say that generally all Canadians are concerned about the loss of jobs. We're definitely all concerned about like the loss of resource dependent communities, which is a big deal. Then obviously, that creates poverty, like going back to the Indigenous issue as well. And then I think we're just not sure. Like we just really just want job security. We want energy security. I think there's a lot of challenges, but I feel like if we all come together as Canadians, we can all face them together.
Yeah, it would definitely change the view if we were thinking more about how we can bring more green technologies in the different fields. I feel that that's what is bringing a lot of fear and concerns to like communities that are dependent on resources. And there is so much potential there. And not only that, but we have here in Canada so many great technologies that we created here and that we are currently developing here in terms of carbon emission reduction, carbon capture, and all that good stuff. So I feel like there is so much potential there, and especially for young people to get involved and get in those sectors for employment and such.
So this would say, no, definitely not. This issue is not a dichotomy and no workable solutions will come from a one side versus the other approach. The initial concept behind the just transition is to balance the needs of the environment with the needs of people, which includes carbon emissions reductions, job security, and energy security. But this can only happen with adequate consultation of resource workers, along with opportunities to diversify Canada's energy mix, implement technologies such as carbon capture, and continue to innovate to minimize environmental impacts. So definitely all has to work in tandem with each other.
Yeah, so what I will say is like jobs in transition friendly fields like renewable energy and green technology, they are there to like somewhat compensate, but they're not like a perfect match for everyone and every community out there. And I'm especially thinking here about like Indigenous communities who have like a real need for work on their land, on their reserve, and who need like good high paying jobs locally, which is like what Lily spoke about beforehand. So there are a great example, however, projects in renewable that are Indigenous led and that provide jobs locally, which like Lily said, in her own reserve. So we for sure need to put more support in those kinds of projects, I feel like, and this is why it's a core element of having a transition that is just, is to let communities and people lead the way and make decisions that will benefit them in the long run.
There is a bright future for Indigenous economic development. I truly believe that the government should work with Indigenous communities, which they do, hand in hand. So most communities obviously are trying to work towards reducing their carbon footprints. Lots are already working towards green technology. And I just think that, they should help facilitate more engagement between the energy sector and Indigenous communities, not less. I feel like there should be more in the future. It should expand, it should become bigger, and, move forward together.
The just transition should be focused on reducing carbon emissions and moving towards a low carbon economy, which applies to all industries, including renewables. Oil and gas is necessary to ensure energy security and job security in Canada, as well as to fund research into lower carbon technologies. So definitely doesn't need to be something that we look at stepping away from tomorrow.
Yeah, I feel like I have I see the urgency of talking about climate change and doing the whole transition thing because there is an urgency to climate change, right? And this puts pressure on communities who I think don't feel like they have enough resource to face those transitions that are asked of them. So there's definitely pressure there, like time pressure, for both sides. Both on the fact that we need to act for climate change now, and communities who feel like, oh my God, this is I have to do something now. This is so much pressure, and I feel like there is definitely a way to answer to both of those concerns at the same time, because both of those concerns are very true and they're important to address for sure. So in climate justice theory, there is this idea that climate change is directly caused by inequality. So we wouldn't be stuck with global warming if it wasn't for social and economic injustice in the world. So because of that, I think that because climate change is an expression of inequality and injustice, any solutions that create more inequality or more injustice is a false solution. So, and it's causing more harm than good. So there's no question for me as if, do we have enough time or do we not have enough time? Because every climate solution needs to be just and equal in order to be effective, which is what we all want.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of based off of ensuring security within communities, some of what I think should be considered when a transition goes into effect are not only the workers in that industry, but also the surrounding local community. To me, it's just as important that the locally run grocery stores and the mom and pop shops aren't going to be negatively impacted and will be able to continue to function at a normal capacity. Job loss or jobs of lesser quality definitely impact the entire community. So asking workers to leave their community impacts all of their sectors within the area, which goes back to your point of it's very important that opportunities are available and somewhat within the same area.
What I would say is that we should not get caught up in the wording, just because the wording can have such a negative connotation, it shouldn't mean that we should throw the baby with the bathwater. I don't know if it's an expression in English, but we shouldn't just get rid of the idea, because I feel like the idea behind it of taking into account communities and people who are the most vulnerable to impacts of such a transition, it's super important. And it's something that we need to talk about, not only in oil and gas, but really in every resources that we have in Canada. So if I was to have a message, it would be to not get caught in the wording and look at the broader picture here.
Yeah,
I really agree with Camila's thought on, like, getting caught up in the wording, because that is such a big problem for so many people. It's ostracizing, it's scary. So I just also really want to say, as long as the just transition policy is supporting Canadians, I feel like Canadians should support the just transition policy. Moving towards a lower carbon future is a good thing. We just don't want anybody to be left behind, whether that be the workforce, anyone that's, going to have to struggle on EI or government support. Not a good thing for us. We don't want anyone to lose their livelihood. So if none of those things happen, I feel like naturally it'll be an easier thing for Canadians to get behind and accept.
somewhere in the middle between you guys, I would also like to say that I think it's really important for all of us to come together and find some common ground. To me, it's not such a black and white issue. Oh, you can only care about the environment. Oh, you can only care about the economy. To me, they really go hand in hand. And ultimately, the goal of the just transition is to balance those. So somewhere in there, we all need to have these kind of discussions and realize, like, actually, we all would like to move towards the same things. And I think that that would contribute to a very successful initiative. I've been talking a lot, so I apologize, but if nobody has any other thoughts, I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up there. Lily and Camila, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate having your thoughts and your perspective as young people in Canada as well.
Thank you so much, Hannah, for having us on today.
Would love to do this again sometime. I'll let you guys get back to your Thursdays. And yeah, thank you again. Thanks to everybody that tuned in today.